The trial that could have determined control of the Denver Broncos is called off at the last minute. We'll look at what that means. Officer Gordon Beesley took the job seriously. He did not take himself seriously. Today, Colorado remembers an officer whose colleagues say set the standard. More kids in Colorado don't have health insurance.
When a policy creates fear in a community, it's really hard to reverse.
It's a specific disparity for Hispanic and Latino young people. An update on the cell phone tracking going on downtown. Creepy Colorado is not confined to the city center. And to reach a unique combination of exercise and art, you take I-25 to exit 235, then 2 miles northeast to the skate park. It appears there's a deal to decide the future of the Denver Broncos. Rather than fighting it out in court, a very public airing of the Bolin family's internal dispute, both sides today filed a joint motion to keep it out of the spotlight of a courtroom. 9 Wants to Know confirmed through a source this afternoon that that 4-week trial expected to start in mid-July has been called off. We reached out to attorneys for Beth Bolin Wallace and the team, as well as Broncos president Joe Ellis. Nobody's talking right now. Bolin Wallace and her sister Amy Clemmer filed that lawsuit against the trustees of their late father Pat Bolin's estate. They claimed that Pat Bolin was already diminished by Alzheimer's when he set up the 3-person trust to run the Broncos in 2009. In 2014, Bolin was forced to transfer control of the team to that trust, and then he passed away in 2019. If a settlement has been reached, which we do not yet know if that's the case, just that both parties are coming forward with something that suggests that's happening, what that means is that one party could have agreed to buy the other party out to end this, or that the fractured Bolin family agreed together to sell that team after 37 years of family ownership. I-70 is preemptively closed right now through Glenwood Canyon for fear that the walls could come tumbling down for the 3rd time in 4 days. CDOT had been warning drivers to find another route because of the risk of mudslide. They had already been preparing to divert traffic onto I-80 through Utah, Wyoming, and Kansas. And sure enough, it happened within the hour. With a storm approaching the Grizzly Creek burn scar, CDOT decided to shut down 70 from Glenwood to Dot Zero. The interstate was closed Sunday into Monday because of back-to-back mudslides in the Grizzly Creek burn scar area. And one on Saturday, larger one Sunday. And as we talked about here yesterday, back-to-back slides in the same place suggested to CDOT that there was a lot more loose material up there ready to come down onto the interstate. It takes half an inch of rain in less than an hour to create mudslides in most burn scars. That Grizzly Creek burn area needs even less rain to get going because of the steepness of the slope and the intensity of last year's fire. CDOT said it had crews ready to go if more mud and debris came crashing down on that highway. And this is a good time to remind people, should you ever find yourself caught in a mud flow while driving, stay in your car. Our coverage this week of the Downtown Denver Partnership tracking people in the city, it's how they know that office workers have not yet come back. It led to a ton of you asking last night how it is you can be tracked without your consent. Chances are you did consent. It's those pesky terms of service. Here's Steve Steger.
How do they know you're downtown? Today we got a bit more clarification. The Downtown Denver Partnership created this graph of people visiting, working, and living downtown through a company called Placer AI. Essentially, Placer partners with more than 500 cell phone apps to aggregate anonymized location data. A spokesman for the company told me today that Placer gets location data from 30 million devices across the country, then uses the sampling of data to create an estimate of how many people are traveling to, working, or living in a certain place.
We allow lots of apps to get access to our location information, GPS and those sorts of things. I mean, certain apps, maps, and these sorts of things don't work unless you have the phone turn on GPS.
That's Steve BEATY, the chair of the computer science department at MSU Denver and a cybersecurity and data expert. He says data collection is all around us and most of us have no idea.
In general, then many of these applications have location awareness, as it's called. And unless you explicitly turn it off, then those wide variety of apps then are sharing your location data kind of on an ongoing basis.
But I didn't opt into that, you say? You probably did the last time you downloaded an app, turned on location services, and didn't read.
Legally and typically in these end user license agreements, there are a lot of words to the fact that here is what we're going to use your data for. Yeah, we're going to anonymize it in certain circumstances.
As for those kiosks on the 16th Street Mall, the Downtown Denver Partnership told us today they really only track pedestrian traffic on the mall using Bluetooth signals from phones. That'll tell them where people are going and where they're lingering, also anonymously.
All of these signals are emanating from our phone all the time.
Now, Placer AI told us firmly today that their data is anonymized from the start. They never see any identifying info. BEATY is skeptical, says that there's an old saying in cybersecurity, anonymous data rarely remains anonymous. The work done to anonymize that info can be reverse engineered. And BEATY says this technology more common than you might think. He actually says there are some billboards in town that when you drive by, they read your cell phone information and they can actually pinpoint when certain people are driving through the area, put up a special ad for those people as they're driving through the area. Like they figure out the patterns.
Whoa. Welcome back to the studio for the first time in a year plus. How are your cats doing at home?
They're missing me. So
understandably,
yeah.
But we no longer are. Thank you, Steve. Well, we learned today, collectively as a state, that it's a shame that all of us couldn't have had the opportunity to meet Arvada police officer Gordon Beesley, because that man seems to have left an unforgettable impression on all those who did. Officer Beesley was remembered today at a private service as a loving father, a husband, and a brother, but also as a musician, a world traveler, a Harley rider, and a former huge hippie who would love to serenade his colleagues. 51-year-old officer was killed in the line of duty a week and a day ago in Old Town Arvada. He was a 19-year veteran of that department. His colleagues insist that it was his work as a school resource officer that was his true passion.
He truly found his calling, where he made a difference to hundreds of young students in our community, and he had an innate ability to find the students that needed help the most and to guide them through anything they were struggling with.
6 years ago, Steve Sager had the opportunity to spend some time with the man behind the badge, and in just a moment, Steve will share a few words about their chance meeting at Oberon Middle School. Any law enforcement officer in the country who did not hear what the Supreme Court did this week should take a moment to review it. It's potentially a big deal, and it got the attention of our Chris Vanderveen, who spent a year and a half looking into why Americans continue to die handcuffed and face down. Chris has this update to his prone investigation.
What happened inside this jail in 2015 generated little attention beyond the city of St. Louis. When Nicholas Gilbert's mother sued that city, the city won. And yet this week, in a very unusual decision, the U.S. Supreme Court said, in essence, hold on a second.
It recognized that this is an issue that is important nationally.
Attorney John Taylor helped file this petition with the court. He wanted the court to review the case, in part because of an issue we've now reported on extensively, that people like Gilbert can die when held face down and handcuffed. This week, in this decision, justices said there is well-known police guidance recommending that officers get a subject off his stomach as soon as he is handcuffed.
The very fact that the Supreme Court is saying that and is recognizing this, I think is significant and could have a pretty profound effect going forward.
Why? Because our investigation found officers routinely lingering on the backs of people handcuffed and prone, minute after minute after minute. Our list of prone restraint deaths now includes 121 names. Names you know well, like George Floyd's, and names you might not, like Nicholas Gilbert's.
There's no denying the message that this will send to lower courts and to law enforcement alike.
The Supreme Court's decision, endorsed by 6 of the 9 justices, sends the case back to a lower court. Coincidentally, this week, Minnesota legislators agreed to essentially ban prone restraint in their prisons.
At the end of the day, prone restraint is a dangerous tactical move.
Minnesota Corrections Commissioner Paul Schnell knows the decision follows the airing of our prone investigation in that state by our sister station, CARE TV.
We have to get people to a place where they can breathe, where they're sitting up, where they're standing up, where they're in a seated position.
The court commits you to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections.
Last week, a judge in Minnesota sentenced former officer Derek Chauvin to 22 and a half years in the state's prison system. We should note, The decision by the state to ban prone restraint in its prisons will now protect the very man who spent more than 9 minutes on the back of George Floyd. For Next, this is Chris Vanderveen.
Both the Denver and Minneapolis police departments agreed to change the way that they train their officers following the prone investigation. Another remembrance of Officer Gordon Beesley, whose genuine love for his community was on display daily at school. And healthcare rates for Colorado's Hispanic and Latino children have dropped sharply. We'll look at why and what can be done to fix it. Next. The rate of kids in Colorado without health insurance is slowly increasing. Research from the Colorado Health Institute says it's not happening everywhere. It's one specific demographic. Here's Victoria De Leon.
Hilda Gonzalez has a front row seat to the barriers some Hispanic and Latino Coloradans face. She works for Servicios de la Raza and helps families apply for health insurance.
One of the main and strong barriers to apply for health insurance is for our documented population, not for the legal status.
The Center for Children and Families at Georgetown University released a study earlier this month. Their research showed an increase of more than 354,000 uninsured Latino children in the United States between 2016 and 2019.
And we found something really troubling in 2019.
Joe HANEL and his team at the Colorado Health Institute found similar disparities in our state, a nearly 6% increase in uninsured Latino children from 2017 to 2019.
That extrapolates from 9,000 kids to 27,000. So, I mean, it's like it tripled.
Joe and Hilda believe those numbers are reflective of the public health charge policy applied to Medicaid and health benefits under the Trump administration, which meant people who were trying to become U.S. residents or citizens could have their applications denied if they were likely to use Medicaid.
I remember a family that came and they wanted to get enrolled in Connect for Health Colorado. Their kids were eligible for CHP Plus and they still didn't want them to get CHP Plus, so not even like fill out the application.
In March 2021, the Department of Homeland Security announced the government will no longer defend the 2019 public charge rule. Hilda says she started to receive more calls about enrolling for health coverage after the American Rescue Plan went into effect this year. But reversing the fear in these communities and getting those uninsured numbers down will likely take time.
When a policy creates fear in a community, it's really hard to reverse.
For Next, I'm Victoria De Leon.
Colorado Health Institute's now looking at the uninsured rates for kids in 2020, and they expect to have those numbers ready for the public this fall.
Lots of sunshine earlier today. Now evening showers slowing traffic on I-25, but temperatures were warmer, upper 70s and lower 80s. We go even warmer tomorrow. But more moisture coming in from the south, and that will translate to afternoon thunderstorms, which could turn heavy out on the eastern plains this time tomorrow night. Moisture moving across the burn scars in the Colorado High Country. We've got some advisories for flooding up there, and we're watching some slow-moving thunderstorms in the Grizzly Creek burn area. In Denver, just a little thunder and lightning and rain early and then clearing out. Our low at 57. Tomorrow's high in the low 80s with an afternoon thunderstorm. A similar forecast for Thursday, and then a warming and drying trend right into the holiday weekend with only 1 or 2 fireworks from Mother Nature on the 4th of July.
In his nearly 20 years in law enforcement, Officer Gordon Beesley's colleagues say they never saw the man in a bad mood. What a thing to say about a coworker in any profession, let alone one with the stresses of law enforcement. Arvada's police chief said this morning at Beesley's funeral service that spending 5 minutes with him could cheer anybody up. Our Steve Steger knows that firsthand.
8 hours. It's impossible to get to know someone in a third of a day. But it was all I needed to learn who Officer Gordon Beesley was. We met at the crack of dawn outside Oberon Middle School, the place where people who loved Beesley gathered early Tuesday morning to say goodbye. We met so early on that day in 2015 because Beesley was going to meet his friend Micah to ride bikes with him on his way to school. That was my story assignment that day. But we witnessed so much that didn't go on tape. As kids arrived at school for the day, Beesley greeted them by name, almost every single one of them. You could tell he had a relationship with each kid. His chief said today he would make time for everybody, He made you feel like the most important person in the room. That's how he made Micah feel on those bike rides. Beesley told me he spent 5 years as a traffic cop. For 5 years, he was the worst part of someone's day, he said. Now he got to be the best part of someone's day. His chief also said this morning that Officer Beesley humanized the badge. There's a tree planted in a park near Oberon Middle School, an award for Beesley winning Employee of the Year for his work with Micah. When we stopped there briefly during that ride, Beesley told me he wanted to plant a good climbing tree, said he'd climb it when he retired. He'll never get that chance, but my hope is that tree gets a ton of traffic, and when they climb, they remember the man we all should have had the pleasure of knowing, even if it was only for 8 hours.
A skate park, but make it art.
It felt pretty cool, actually, to be able to paint a skate park and not really have to worry about the police or anyone actually coming up and giving you some trouble for doing something illegal.
Let's head up I-25 to a town smart enough to let the young people get creative. Next. The Frederick Skate Park is pretty much like every other, except for the art that infuses color into that cold concrete. We went up to Weld County for a look at what they've created.
One of the concerns that came up from the public was, how do you stop graffiti? And one of the suggestions that the Team Payne folks had, Tim Payne specifically had, was in their experience, ramps and features of the course that are painted by artists tend to not be graffitied. Hi, I'm Jennifer Simmons with the Town of Frederick. I'm the planning director here. So we had two artists. Zach McKinnon is one of our artists, and Adam Van Dudecom is the other artist, and they've done amazing work.
Name's Zach McKinnon. Been working with Frederick on their art for 4 years now. So the pipe behind me is an aquatic scene that I decided to do. I like jellyfish, I like the aquatic scenes and everything. You never know what you're gonna see down in the oceans.
My name is Adam Van Dudecom. I am a local artist here in Frederick and a tattooer in Denver. Skated a little bit, wish I was a lot better. Could have been a lot better. This is one of my pieces. It's a ripper skull, right? And it's stylized or influenced from the 90s skate decks that I really grew up and loved when I was a kid. To be a part of this project was really, like, I was very excited. You know, I think the kids really enjoy it, and yeah, it's a cool feeling, you know? It's really nice.
Cool spot. Hey, national parks, they're not petting zoos. That reminder for the humans and your feedback next. Holding your kid close enough to an elk that it could pet its antlers? That's not how you Colorado. That's how your child ends up as a hood ornament for an angry animal. Our viewer Jody was not too happy to see this up at Rocky on Sunday. Group of people getting up close and too personal with an elk near Milner Pass. I looked this up on the Google. Fun fact, elk are among the fastest land mammals. Most of us are not. Jody says she tried to warn these people, they didn't care. Terry's not pleased with our reporting on prone restraint deaths, says we're throwing fuel on the fire. Terry, when law enforcement experts are begging their colleagues to stop using this restraint and the Supreme Court's getting involved, we're not offering fuel, we're offering a fire extinguisher. See you next time.